mean, this is the first seminar we've had, first public seminar we've had since the board was fully reconstituted, and it is great to be back in business and to be getting on with the work which is so valuable for us. At our very first board meeting, we asked for a detailed briefing from the PSNI on how prepared they were for the EU exit, and to give us some idea of the work that they've progressed to date. Because everyone here knows failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And I'd have to say that the PSNI stood up to the challenge and have actually prepared for practically all eventualities, as they will tell you, because as we stand here today, we're still not quite sure what's going to happen. The board felt it was very important that some of the operational implications for policing and issues that we're looking at from the policing perspective should be shared with you. And when I say the board, I really mean Dolores Kelly. She was really the one who really wanted it, but we did feel it was important. And we had other ideas for a public session, but we thought this was very timely. Very much we are aware of the uncertainty and concern it's causing people at the moment, and particularly for people who cross the border or travel within the EU for work or business or family or leisure purposes. One of our advantages, I suppose, is that we have a very good working relationship with An Garda Síochána, so that will be useful for whatever happens, and we intend to work on that. We're also very pleased that the PSNI were successful in their bid for extra money, because this did put a big strain on resources, human resources and financial resources, and we're not sure though how far this will extend into the future should we need it. So there's a lot to discuss, and I'm not going to take up the time because, as I say, we're running late. Before I hand over to Stephen, I want to just assure you that if you don't want your photograph taken, please tell somebody, because this is being recorded. There is no plans to exit the building, there's no fire alarms or anything like that. So hopefully we'll be able to run right through until 1:30. So now, Stephen, I'll hand over to you, and just to say welcome Stephen and Tim Mears, who's been doing a lot of the work on preparing the PSNI for the EU exit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, whilst many of the details around the future relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union remain to be agreed, the UK's exit from the EU represents a seismic shift for people in the UK, in Ireland and in Europe. EU exit is a political process. As a police service, we have been, and we will continue to be, entirely apolitical on this issue. Our focus since the referendum has been, amid all the uncertainty, to assess as best we can the potential operational impacts for policing in Northern Ireland. At various junctures, we have been asked, both in private and public forums, to provide our professional policing assessment, and we have done so without any political opinion or perspective. That is the manner in which we come here today. We are grateful to the Policing Board for this seminar and for the opportunity to answer questions from the community on policing the EU exit. For us, our work on the EU exit has had policing with the community at its core. Our planning has concerned how best we continue to deliver a policing service to our communities despite any change and challenge that presents. We have thought carefully about community confidence, particularly for those communities in the border areas. Partnerships are a critical aspect of policing, and they will be key in the weeks, months and years ahead. Over the last 2 years, the level of consultation and partnership working has been exceptional. We have worked and engaged in extensive briefing and dialogue with policing and criminal justice colleagues, including, among others, the National Crime Agency, the National Police Chiefs Council, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and An Garda Síochána. We have also had many senior government officials and indeed cabinet ministers visit us to learn more about the PSNI. In addition, the Chief Constable and I, along with Assistant Chief Constable Mears, have given evidence to a wide range of parliamentary committees. It has been important for us that partners involved in the EU exit process understand the uniqueness of policing in Northern Ireland. While PSNI face similar challenges to other UK policing services, such as the potential loss of the European arrest warrant, policing in this jurisdiction must also consider the implications around what will become the only land border between the UK and the EU, alongside a severe terrorist threat which actively targets police officers and other security personnel. Policing here also needs to be sensitive to the fact that we serve a community still in transition. For many people in our society, space, symbols and history remain contested. Board members will be well aware when police are called upon to serve in a contested space, it can be very costly, both in financial terms and in terms of community confidence in policing. We have worked hard to plan and prepare amid that uncertainty that has surrounded the EU exit process, and I believe that, in the circumstances of that uncertainty, we are in as good a place as possible. The government have made available an additional £16.5 million in funding, which will allow us to recruit some 308 additional police officers and staff. The fact that government gave PSNI the money we had bid for is testament to how hard we have worked to understand and prepare for the changes and the challenges that the EU exit could present. As Deputy Chief Constable, I am the senior responsible officer for EU exit from a policing perspective, and I am supported by 2 Assistant Chief Constables, each of whom lead on a distinct body of work. Assistant Chief Constable Tim Mayers, who is here with me today, is leading work on the impact on policy and police powers, while Assistant Chief Constable Mark Hamilton is leading on work to ensure the PSNI is operationally prepared across a range of police responsibilities and functions. Tim, in a moment, will provide you with some more detail on these work streams. But before I conclude, I want to reassure the board and the community that despite all the uncertainty and whatever changes and challenges that may lay ahead, the communities we serve will be at the core of all that we do. Thank you, and obviously Tim is going to present in some more detail now, after which I'm delighted, with the Chair's permission, to take some questions from the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Mayers. I lead on one element of EU exit for the Chief Constable and for the Deputy. So I'm going to take you through just a very quick presentation, and hopefully we can address a lot of questions and have a good informative discussion today. A couple of opening comments, I guess, around this. Clearly, what we're here today to talk about is how the PSNI have addressed and are preparing for EU exit. There remains a very high level of uncertainty around what will occur. So clearly, like everyone else here, we await what is a very complex and potentially very long-running political negotiation to understand the full details of what this means. But what we're hoping to do today is demonstrate and reassure people that actually we have been very actively planning for all scenarios with a view to ensuring that we keep people safe in Northern Ireland, and that we work effectively with partners to implement whatever the outworkings of those negotiations look like. And uncertainty certainly is a very strong theme through all of this preparation, and I think as a police service it's therefore incumbent on us to provide certainty to people. And one of the key messages for us today is to say that we have worked exceptionally hard to understand the potential implications of a range of scenarios within EU exit, and then to plan effectively for that, so that we can continue to keep people safe on this island in Northern Ireland and with our colleagues in the South of Ireland as well, regardless of what works out of that. As the Deputy indicated, this is a very, very large piece of work, and I think the fact that you have the Deputy Chief Constable coordinating it and 2 Assistant Chief Constables spending a considerable amount of their time working on this really indicates that from a PSNI perspective, but actually I know that there are a large number of partners in this room who are working equally as hard and certainly harder, and it's right and appropriate that we acknowledge the support and the help that we've had throughout all of this. but it can't be underestimated the amount of time and the amount of effort that all public agencies are putting into preparing for EU exit. And I think at the heart of all of this then is understanding that an awful lot of the media coverage and an awful lot of the debate and the discussion that we see on our screens every day and listen to on our radios are about processes and are about negotiations. But actually, from a police service perspective, as people who work in the communities and many of the communities who will be affected by this, we see this as an issue impacting people and impacting communities. And therefore, we've always been very keen in all of our engagements to stress that to partners and to stress that to all sides who are involved in negotiations, that actually at the heart of this are people who are uncertain about their future and who want reassurance and want engagement around what's going to occur. And I think that's a really strong thing. The Deputy mentioned that there are two strands to this. So in the police service, we have to give them names. So the first element of this is my part, and it's called Operation Nebraska. Operation Nebraska is the longer-term transformational project for the police service of Northern Ireland. So it's our job to understand a lot of the technical discussions that are ongoing and then translate into reality, into policy, into practice, into business cases, and into the securing of resources. How the police service will have to transform over the next 4 to 5 years to continue to deliver on our commitment to the board of keeping people safe in Northern Ireland. And you'll see from the display then that there are a number of strands to this. I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues here who are part of the full-time team working on this. It is a small team, but they work exceptionally hard on trying to understand the implications of what's currently being developed. So the first element is the powers and policy piece, just on the left. And I suppose when we break down in very simple terms for policing, the powers and policies that we look to allow us to operate and cooperate with international partners, that can be either in Paris Síochána locally, it can be within Europe or further apart. There really are, broadly speaking, 3 big strands for us. There is the international framework, and that applies kind of globally, and that maybe the most recognisable part of that are the provisions under Interpol and international cooperation that can be operated, and we do that in conjunction with our colleagues in the Public Prosecution Service. In the middle we have an awful lot of provisions that have been made available through European arrangements as our membership of the European Union. And we use those very effectively, and many of those are streamlined, and people will know the likes of the European arrest warrant and other provisions. And then finally on the island, between Northern Ireland, as represented by the UK government, and the Republic of Ireland, we have provisions on the island that are actually what we refer to as bilateral. So there's an interagency agreement in 2002, and there are other forms of legislation that allow Northern Ireland and Ireland to interact on a daily basis. So in an EU exit scenario, we remain capable of using the international tools, and we remain capable of using the bilateral tools. What we essentially lose are the European provisions. So there are an awful lot of those, and it would be a significant blow for us. But actually, by looking at those other 2 categories, then we can work with the Department, the Home Office, and others to start to understand how we minimise the risk to us as an organisation. It's important to stress that we rely very, very heavily on these powers, and they are a key piece of keeping people safe on this island and in this region. So, under the European arrest warrant, this week alone, we'll be seeking to bring 5 people back to Northern Ireland on the basis of a European arrest warrant for a range of serious offences. And that demonstrates how critical that power is, because it sends the message to criminals that actually there is no hiding place, and whilst you can commit an offence and try and flee the jurisdiction, we are able to reach into other jurisdictions and we are able to bring people back. The European arrest warrant tends to be a much more prompt and much quicker form of extradition than previous bilateral agreements, in particular when we talk about our relationship with Ireland, where in the past, pre that, you could look at extraditions taking years and years, and now we can get people brought back or can transfer people to Ireland very, very quickly in a matter of weeks or months in relation to offences. So the European arrest warrant is probably the most visible of those, but every day policing in the United Kingdom accesses a whole range of European systems, millions and millions of times a year, to access information about people who've across Europe, to check criminal records, or respective vetting, and checking people's suitability for access to vulnerable groups and such matters. So it plays an absolutely critical part for us. The ability through Europol to form joint investigation teams allows us to enter into agreements to investigate the most serious of offences, drug trafficking, modern slavery and human trafficking, serious crime, working hand in glove with our partners both within the prosecution side and the policing side across Europe. And as a result of that, we see some really, really serious successes where people are removed from harm, are placed in safety, and where the people responsible for exploiting or harming those people are brought before the law court. So I can't stress how important those powers are to us as a police service. It's worth understanding then that in a day's scenario at the moment, when we look at the withdrawal agreement as it currently stands, there is and then we look at the future political, or the outline political declaration, which is the future piece. So within the outline political declaration, there is a commitment to a future security agreement between the United Kingdom and Europe. And there is a commitment, by and large, to attempt to create as similar arrangements as possible. There is a likelihood some of those will just not quite be as effective as they were, but certainly in the day's scenario, as the police service, we note that there is a broadly a commitment to replicate those matters. I'll quickly look at Karen Pearson from DOJ just to make sure I'm right on that, but that's the situation. This becomes a lot more acute for us in a no-deal scenario where many of those powers would cease quite suddenly. And it's at that situation an awful lot of the work and effort in working with the Department of Justice and the Home Office has been placed to ensure that we are able to replicate to the best of our ability these powers and functions that we've talked about. In a no-deal scenario, the National Police Chiefs Council and our own Chief Constable have been very clear in saying that whatever we put in place will be sub-optimal to what we currently have. So we will lose, in some cases lose capabilities, and in other cases things that we could have done previously, such as the checking of criminal records, which can be done in a matter of days, would take months and months. So you would see a lot more bureaucracy and things would slow down and become a lot more complicated. But I'm very encouraged that particularly in our situation on the island of Ireland, that whilst there remain risks in certain areas, that there's been an awful lot of very effective work done, and there's a clear willingness by all parties to ensure that we minimise that risk. Another element of mitigating around that is the International Crime Coordination Centre, which has been established by the National Police Chiefs Council and is based in London, and DS and I have connected ourselves very strongly to that, and the purpose of that policing centre is to try and manage a lot of these processes which become more cumbersome and more challenging, and we're very, very committed to that, and we acknowledge the really good work that has been done in a very short period of time by UK policing to put in place something which I think is very, very effective, and which is the police service we have a physical presence in on a daily basis, 3 to 4 days a week at this stage, and we can scale that up as required. The second area then to the other side is that of our cross-border relationship with primarily with Garda Síochána, but also with the likes of the Revenue Commissioners and others. You will all be aware that under the Stormont House Agreement, the Cross-Border Joint Agency Task Force was created, and in my former role I was the chair of that, and the deputy was the chair of the strategic group for that. That brings together Garda Síochána, the Revenue Commissioners, UK Border Force, HMRC, National Crime Agency, Home Office Immigration. Brings us all together around the table, focusing on cross-border threats that are identified as a priority, and that drives operational activity, and we've seen an awful lot of real success around that. And I suppose the commitment on our side, and a lot of the work that I've been doing in that space, is to ensure that that continues regardless of the outcomes of what may occur. Information sharing and the likes of European Arrest Warrant are critical to allow us to have the statutory frameworks to do that work, but the assurance from our part is that the commitments to cooperate and the commitments to work collectively, operationally, to target these threats across the border are very, very strong, and we're keen to continue that to work with that. The other strand of that is the cross-border strategy, which currently exists between Garda Síochána and the Police Service of Northern Ireland. It was signed by the two Ministers of Justice in 2016, and again we're ensuring that we drive the priorities under that to ensure that we're maximising the current existing cooperation frameworks that we have with Garda Síochána, and continuing to push that and drive that. It's really important to note that the Commissioner and the Chief Constable are very vocal on this matter of continuing the strong relationships, and we're absolutely committed to continuing to work together through this period of uncertainty. In the bottom corner there's a section about organisational preparedness, so we're joined today by Mark McNaughton, who's our Head of Resourcing for the Police Service. Whilst we are a police service, we're also a large business. We have a around a £700 million budget. And like other businesses, we need to examine and understand what the potential impact of EU exit is on supply chains, is on contracts, and human resourcing and other issues. And Yvonne Cook, who's our head of HR, is here as well. We've done a lot of work around understanding for our officers and staff who may be non-UK nationals or others, what the implications are for them, and worked hard to brief them and prepare them for that and ensure that there's absolute clarity, again, to eliminate as much uncertainty as possible. And the last category is on counter-terrorism, security and stability. And that's again working with UK partners and with An Garda Síochána to ensure that we maintain our ability to share information and intelligence in respect of a wide range of national security threats throughout these challenges, and that we bear in mind some of the specific threats that exist around the common travel area and other elements like that, and ensure that we take an effective response to that. But that we ensure that it's a people-centred and proportionate response as well. There's a crossover element then between Nebraskan and the next element that I'll talk about, which is our work to establish our understanding of what a virtual border will look like within Northern Ireland. So an awful lot of the narrative politically has been about the fact that there will be no hard border, but actually as a police service and with our partners we were keen to start to talk about, okay, so there currently exists a virtual border here. There are checks and there are certain differentials between the north and the south, and there are even checks east to west. So under the various scenarios, what would that virtual border look like across the whole range of factors that influence a border? So people, tariffs, standards, and other matters around agri-food and other things. So we really, really appreciate the support of the UK Border Force, HMRC, and other partners in constantly trying to understand in a vast range of scenarios what would that virtual border look like between the south to north and west to east, and how, as we as a police service, will we be required to support that. That's a very complex area of work, and it requires an awful lot of relationship building. And again, we've been very appreciative of all our government partners in helping us understand the potential outworkings of a wide range of very, very complex negotiations. I think one of the key bits of working through this uncertainty is that we need to focus on what are the implications for policing in our communities, rather than getting sucked into a lot of the technical language, which for me as a simple police officer, I struggle with at the best of times. So often trying to get it down to a simple kind of scenario has been very helpful for us in planning. The second area is Operation Cookhouse, and that is led by Mark Hamilton. Whilst I'm essentially a project manager of a large project, Mark is a gold commander of an operation, and this operation is in response to the potential for a no-deal scenario and a no-deal exit, if you will, of the UK from the European Union. There is an overarching UK government plan, which many of you will have heard referred to as Operation Yellowhammer. And then there's a national police operation which sits within that. Operation Cookhouse is the PSNI element of the local arrangements to this planning. It's a very significant piece of work, and as you can see from all of the work streams, it's extensive in its planning. So my folks in Nebraska work very closely with the Cookhouse team to ensure that as we get a readout and an understanding from partner agencies that that's fed into our operational planning. We have with partners developed planning assumptions to drive what our operational plans need to look like, and then we've worked exceptionally hard at testing and exercising those. There is a central planning team has been set up, and it is well resourced to ensure that we are prepared. And as I say, this is very, very closely integrated into the work of the Northern Ireland Civil Service in the Northern Ireland office to prepare the whole of government for a no-deal scenario. To say that this is a complex piece of work is an understatement, and when we're trying to calibrate impacts across a wide range of sectors, both being translated at a UK level and at a Northern Ireland level, and that's before we get to Dublin and Brussels, and then understand from policing terms what the implications are for us as a police service, ensure that we support partners within our legislative requirements, but also ensure that we don't step outside of our remit in a way that means that we're putting resource to things that we shouldn't have to be doing. It's a really complicated and complex piece of work, and Mark has been leading very capably on that for some time. As I said, we have developed our planning assumptions and our plans, and what has been at the heart of this has been an awful lot of exercising and planning with partners. So one of the positive consequences of EU exit has been a real focus and uplift of cross-departmental and cross-government working, and really, really effective development of a lot of the work we've done in the past around emergency planning, and actually seeing that come to reality. So there is the Northern Ireland Civil Service have a hub which is running, which can run, and it will then feed information into the national centre, and will then disseminate information out across that. Police Service of Northern Ireland will have our Strategic Coordination Centre available, and we've worked very, very hard to test what is quite a complex command and control structure and ensure that it is resilient and effective. As the Deputy mentioned, we have received additional funding from HM Treasurer, and that is very, very welcome. That was on the back of the development of the business case, and an awful lot of support from our colleagues in the Department of Justice and the Northern Ireland office in developing that, and in the Department of Finance and in working with Treasury to identify that funding. We hoped for and we intended to get 3 to 4 years worth of funding, so that we had a degree of clarity around where that would come from. With the nature of funding that we're in at the moment, this funding has only been allocated to government departments on an annual basis. So for 1 year we have an uplift of approximately £16.43 million. That allows us to increase our officer and staff numbers overall by 308, hopefully. What that means in real terms is that in the coming financial year we will recruit as many police officers as we physically can. We will maximise our recruitment for this year, and that allows us to increase our head count, as I say, by about 300. I think that's really critical, because that gives us that additional resource which will be available in very uncertain times. We believe that those 300 are part of our overall requirement in both a deal and a no deal scenario, and certainly in a no deal scenario we identify that we could require an awful lot more people in the longer term. You can see from the pie chart then the vast majority of the officers and staff that we'll get this year will be allocated to local policing, and it's really important, I suppose, to explain why we're doing that and what we believe those officers in particular will be involved in. So those officers will primarily be working in border areas, but not exclusively, because we identify that some of the pressures and some of the tensions that could emerge through the political debate and transition around the EU exit could be felt in urban centres as well, such as Belfast. But those officers will be performing 3 main tasks. The first one is they will be doing exactly what we expect, which is effective community policing with those communities, dealing with concerns, engaging and building trust, and ensuring that actually we narrow the space for those who may wish to put forward other narratives or seek to exploit uncertainty around Brexit, that we're effectively combating that and doing that with local communities, with elected representatives and with the likes of our PCSPs and the policing board. Secondly, they will be working exceptionally hard with all parts of the police service and partner agencies in the north, but also within Garda Síochána, to counter and combat cross-border crime and create a safe environment for communities. And we're aware of the potential that was mentioned under the JETF. It was set up to deal with a very specific type of criminality where criminals seek to exploit the border, and we see even at the moment around some of the crime types that we're seeing, criminal groups who seek to move either side of the border. The additional resource we have will allow us to really focus on targeting those groups and creating a safe environment for border communities at this time. And the third area will be to continue to support partner agencies in the work that they're doing in those areas and prepare for the possibility, should it arise, that there may be some increase in that footprint and our ability to continue to support that type of activity and create a safe environment for everybody in doing that. Our portal units work within our airports and seaports, so and those are the internal ports within the United Kingdom, so between Northern Ireland and North and Great Britain. UK Border Force have a responsibility for the external borders, but the police service will resource and provide a presence at our internal checking points, if you will, at seaports and airports. So that allows us to have more people there, and that allows us to be able to increase our ability to detect criminals and other people who are seeking to use Ireland and Northern Ireland as a way to enter Great Britain or to evade detection by law enforcement. I think that's a very positive step as well. There's an increase, small increase, as you'll see, in detectives and our ability to deal with serious and organised crime. And then the last 3 groups are our EU exit team and our international team who support the International Crime Coordination Centre. And then actually to bring in so many additional officers requires an uplift in our human resourcing staff our occupational health and wellbeing staff, our vetting staff, and then within our training staff within the police college. So we've been able to allocate additional staff to allow us to maximise our recruitment in the coming year. We're very hopeful that HM Treasury will consider favourably our requirement for that funding to continue into the following year. But we understand and you know, the reality of where we are is that this business case has been built on an awful lot of hypothesis being developed against what is a very uncertain environment. We certainly welcome that support to date, and we're very hopeful that that will continue into the following financial year. To finish, I just want to, I suppose, address one of the core issues which a lot of people have asked and a lot of communities are concerned about, which is what will the impact of EU exit be on crime, security and stability in Northern Ireland and wider across Ireland. And you'll notice there's a question mark there because the simple answer is, in many ways, because circumstances are still unclear, there's still a lot of question marks over what the potential implications will be. We have planned and prepared to respond to a wide range of scenarios, but we await a lot more detail to understand. But there are some headline issues that all along we've been flagging, both privately to those who are involved in planning and publicly whenever the Deputy, the Chief and myself have attended a wide range of committees. That is that, firstly, we believe that infrastructure and checks at or near the border would likely generate resistance and a potential for violent response and attack. And that is something that we feel has been heard and has been understood, but it's important we continue to stress that. Secondly, it is that differentials between north and south that currently exist, because there are some, are already exploited by organised criminals, and we believe that where those differentials increase, it is likely that that exploitation will similarly increase. How that occurs and to what extent we can counter that through our effective working would really, really depend on the circumstances. So, but what we do identify is that where those differentials increase, we believe that exploitation will increase as well, and we are preparing to respond effectively to that and manage that. And the last issue obviously is, in any scenario where we lose our justice and home affairs measures, the ability to use something close to the European arrest warrant or share information with partners, there is the risk that we would create the perception of a safe haven either in the north or the south, that criminals can commit a crime in one jurisdiction and get to the other where they feel that they're beyond prosecution. And that's something that, again, we've been stressing very clearly to both UK and European representatives, and we believe there's a really strong commitment to ensure that that does not happen. But again, for us, that's a big factor. If we can maintain our ability to work collaboratively on the island of Ireland and actually wider across Europe and Great Britain, then we believe we can continue to effectively respond to crime as it emerges. The reassurance around this is that a number of the key measures that we're taking to deal with this. Firstly, we have worked exceptionally hard, and I benefited greatly from an awful lot of support from the Deputy Chief Constable and the Chief Constable in engaging with senior members of the Cabinet and engaging with senior members of the civil service to constantly stress our concerns and to contribute effectively and significantly and substantively to discussions and development of policy around what the island of Ireland looks like. It's not for us to say what that should look like, but as the Deputy said, we have been very clear in advising those people as to what the potential security implications of arrangements are. We continue to do that. Secondly, and I've said it before and I'll say it again because it is critical, the crown and the jewel in the crown for us is our working relationship with An Garda Síochána. And where that stays strong and where that stays effective, then our ability to counter crime and threat issues on this island will remain very, very strong. And we will continue to do everything that we can, and we will continue to lobby to ensure that that relationship isn't just maintained but actually enhanced as a result of these negotiations. And finally, working exceptionally hard with the UK Government, with the Department of Justice, the Home Office and other partners to ensure that we have a really coherent and clear idea as to what those measures, justice and home affairs measures, look like in all scenarios and how we mitigate any loss and again potentially improve our ability to counter crime across Europe is absolutely critical, and again we acknowledge the work of all our partners in dealing with that. So that is a very, very quick rush through of EU exit. My colleagues will know I could talk for 3 or 4 hours on this without taking a breath, so I've tried to keep it brief, but obviously we're available now for questions.
Very much. just when you thought things couldn't get more complicated. Thanks very much for that. I mean, I think it is important that you get to understand how much work has been going on in the background by the police service to prepare us for whatever is going to happen. We're happy to take questions if anybody is ready. If you just would say who you are, while we're waiting for people to get their hair ready for the questions. Just a question I had around the National Crime Agency. Have they had any role in preparing, working with you in this preparation, and if so, what benefit would that be?
Hopefully that's on, is it?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, the National Crime Agency have played quite a key role in some of the points that feed into Tim's area of responsibility. So from the outset, they, along with the Metropolitan Police Service, took the lead on behalf of all UK policing services in trying to understand the impact that would occur if the European Justice and Home Affairs measures were lost. So the European arrest warrant is the most frequently cited example of that, but access to the Schengen Information System for wanted persons, alerted persons, access to the ECRIS system, which allows us to get criminal records right across Europe. Those package of materials are called the European Justice and Home Affairs measures. So Tim's talked to you about the potential for their loss. So right at the outset, the National Crime Agency and the Metropolitan Police Service have represented all UK policing in taking the lead, working with government and other partners and Brussels about trying to understand and mitigate the impact that would occur if those were lost. So, for example, if extradition was lost, what does the 57 agreement allow us to do? What do the Interpol notices that Tim referred to allow us to do if we lost, for example, the Schengen Information System? And we obviously, National Crime Agency, as everybody will be aware, operate in Northern Ireland, so we have regular contact with them. But right at the top, that strategic contact in relation to European exit withdrawal, they've been working very closely with us and other police services.
If nothing else comes out of it, at least the partnerships are strong.
Partnerships are
good. Okay, anyone can go Yvonne?
My name is Yvonne. I'm an independent member of the PCS in Lisbon. I wanted to know, you got 16.4 million this year, and you've been able to employ 308 people. Next year, are they out of a job, or are you going to be able to get another 16.4 million people in pounds in order to keep employing them year on year?
Well, I'll answer that one as well, while Tim gets his breath. So you're quite right, Yvonne. We got 16.48 million. It was a 1-year settlement only, and we're going to employ around 308 people with that. We're going to buy some vehicles with that to help us deal with the policing consequences of the European exit. But it is a 1-year settlement. Government don't give money lightly. Therefore, they will be watching very closely what occurs here to determine whether or not they need to sustain that funding into subsequent years. We will obviously, if we believe that we're in a position to do so, we will be putting in a business case to seek monies for additional years. But part of the agreement that we entered into and the reassurance that the Treasury took was we still have in the region of 300 plus people retiring every year. Therefore, if the decision was taken that funding was not going to be sustained, say we had very favourable withdrawal, the policing consequences were not significant, and we were able to manage, we can, by adjusting our recruitment against cessations, people leaving, we can reduce our numbers down again quite quickly. So the people who we employ by no means will be out of a job, but what we can do is adjust the level of the service by simply matching recruitment to those people leaving, and that was a reassurance that we were able to give the Treasurer.
Thank you. Daniel?
Thanks very much, Daniel Holder from the NGO CAJ. Just like to hear a bit more maybe about preparations for any increases that happen in coming months in relation to racist violence targeted at migrants. Just a concern moving into the next phase of Brexit, you can end up in a situation where the very rights of members of a migrant community to be here they're going to be under question again. We worried that that might be exploited by far-right discourse. Equally, some of the messaging coming out from the Home Office is quite alarming. I mean, they're already putting out tweets saying every EU citizen here, which is actually almost all of us, must register under the settled status scheme by the end of next year, December 2020, or will not be allowed to stay here anymore. Which, putting that into the context, we've already got paramilitary involvement in racist violence, is quite an irresponsible way of messaging the requirements of the settled status scheme. Sort of flow on from that, as well as they're taking that message that anyone who doesn't register, and there'll be lots of people, we've seen what happened with Windrush and the way that those sort of processes worked by the end of 2020, but in fact in a no-deal scenario that could be as short away as 3 months, that there'll only be temporary leave to remain for EU nationals coming in a no-deal scenario for about 3 months. What isn't clear to us, and I don't know whether it's clear to you, is what the Home Office and Border Force are actually intending on doing to enforce that. And it would be a worry that you could end up with fairly, I don't know whether it's just the usual hostile environment stuff, trying to starve people out by not letting them work or access essential public services, or whether actually they are planning to use force, to use detentions and deportations. And I think if they did that, which would be very concerning, that would have a very serious impact on confidence in policing as a whole. And just to throw in a question, Tim, in relation to something you mentioned about Border Force not having a role in, only having a role in relation to the external border rather than the internal border. I don't understand what they're doing in Larne and Belfast ports then. And I mean, there's been a number of very concerning incidents where black people have been singled out and asked for passports, not by PSNI officers, but by Border Force officers. But if they, and there's no clear statutory power for that to be done, but if they actually are not supposed to have any role in internal border enforcement at all, I don't actually understand what they're doing there. And if you have any clarification on that, I'd be grateful for it. I appreciate that's a question best put to them, but I haven't got an answer, so I was wondering if you knew.
Okay, I think this is an area that Tim has turned his mind to as part of Nebraskan, so I think.
Yeah, thank you. I think firstly that your first point about the potential for an increase around race hate crimes and other factors. As you'll have seen from the slide on Operation Cookhouse, we have a specific hate crime strand. Mark Hamilton, who leads on Cookhouse, is actually the national UK leader on hate crime for the National Police Chiefs. So he actually not only has a really clear kind of grip on trends here, he's responsible for coordinating all the hate crime issues for the UK. So what we didn't see were similar trends from GB after the referendum. We didn't see the spikes in Northern Ireland that we did see in the rest of GB, and we're not seeing increases here. But we are monitoring that very closely, and we are working with NGOs and other partner agencies to keep an eye on that and to constantly test ourselves around that. And you know, our commitment is that we will continue to do that. Emma Bond leads for Mark as the Silver League, if you will, within the organisation on hate crime, chairs regular meetings and engages effectively, I think, across the organisation. We take a very, very serious approach to that, and you'll be aware of a number of very prominent prosecutions that are still underway within Northern Ireland of people who sought to come here and seek to preach intolerance, I guess, around certain matters of these issues. We take a very strong stance against that, and we will continue to do that. As far as the role around ports and seaports, and our work with UK Border Force, as the Deputy indicates, we can't really comment on policy for them, but what I would say is the areas you've talked about around immigration enforcement or action against people outside of 3 months are not matters that we've been asked to plan for, they're not matters that we've been asked to support, and they're certainly not anything that have been raised with us. And from a policing perspective, it's not something that we have included in any of our planning assumptions. We can be very, very clear around that. We as the police service work very closely with Border Force, who obviously support the Home Office around immigration issues and the status of people moving through Northern Ireland and moving into the UK. That can often mean that they will be present at other locations where people could be transiting through. That can include Larne and Belfast ports, and they may also be there because there are international ships and other traffic coming into particularly Belfast port that doesn't come from another UK port, so the likes of Colombia and other locations where we have shipping coming directly into Belfast and and Belfast Port actually acts as a European hub for certain transiting products and goods. So Border Force have responsibility for enforcement around the external border and matters around that, but they're not limited only to those external border points, and we work and support them in the work that all goes around that.
Patrick?
Patrick Yu, Northern Ireland Council for Raceway. I just follow up with Daniel's question, mainly on one issue about those frontier workers on both sides. Is the frontier workers falling into the PSNI side or falling into the border police side or the Home Office side? Because we have real concern from members from those ethnic minority. They're working on the border, whether they're healthcare worker, whether they are working in those agri industry or other hospitality industry, living in one side and working on the other side of the border.
I think thank you, Patrick, and that again indicates another factor of uncertainty for people. We've considered the issue of frontier workers for our own staff, some of whom fall into that category. But as a police service, we're not involved in the policy development or enforcement around those issues. But certainly, if you're aware of local people or communities who have concerns, that we can assist in capturing those concerns and representing those with partner agencies, then we'd like to be able to help them do that.
Les?
Les Allenby from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. It's an observation and then a question. I've been struck by business has said they need certainty and clarity, and they've been placed in that difficult position of saying, we're not political, but we need to know what's going to happen. And I get entirely that police service are in the same position in terms of the politics of this. I've been struck by how relatively quiet it's been in terms of the key people leading the negotiations on the security and justice side, the NCA, Association of Chief Police Officers, security services, etc., have not been publicly vocalising their concerns about what happens if we leave in an unmanaged way. So I don't know whether to draw from that there is something there if we leave in an unmanaged way, or whether there is something to be much more worried about. And I suppose my question really is, if we were to leave under the draft withdrawal agreement, we know that all that does is buy us some more time to get some coherence in terms of how it's dealt with. If we leave in an unmanaged way and you lose very quickly all of those data sharing arrangements, and you're falling back on bilateral arrangements as opposed to EU-wide arrangements, what are the ramifications for you in practical policing on a cross-border basis when you're dealing with people moving across kind of the EU and into Ireland and possibly south-north? And my second question, I think, is I'm very struck by, on immigration policy, I know you have policies, how much they've said how we deal with immigration over time will be intelligence-led. But if you lose all of the data sharing and the intelligence, how do you square in a practical policing way that we're going to have kind of immigration which draws in PSNI when we haven't got the data sharing tools that allow you to do that under what I understand to be an intelligence-led policy?
I'll make some comments in relation to that, Les, and then I'll invite Tim to add additional comments. The first thing I want to reassure you is that national security issues are unaffected by this. So the European Justice Home Affairs measures that we're talking about does not affect national security issues. So perhaps when you mention security services and MI5, it's perhaps one reason why they haven't been particularly vocal. The area of business they're in is largely unaffected by this. I wouldn't say we haven't been vocal, on the loss of the European Justice and Home Affairs measures. We have, raised our voice at the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee several times, the EU Exit Committee, House of Lords committees, and undertaking quite a range of various media interviews. However, what we have been spending a lot of time doing, Liz, is trying to figure out exactly the conundrum that you posed. If there was a disorganised withdrawal and there was a loss of those powers, what will we do in a fallback position? And Tim in his presentation quickly referred to a thing called the International Crime Coordination Centre. So that is where the UK policing has come together in one place and tried to look at all the different provisions we have and we enjoy now that allow us to pursue criminal justice outcomes that will be lost in a disorganised withdrawal, for example. And what are the fallback positions? What are the things we can plug the gaps with? And those are, for example, the Interpol notices that Tim referred to, the 57 extradition facility. But those are suboptimal. Those will not necessarily mirror exactly that which is lost. They will undoubtedly be slower, be more bureaucratic, and they will affect our ability to deliver criminal justice outcomes in the way that we can deliver now. So our ability to share information back and forth the border now, and when I say the border, I'm talking about our border with the Republic of Ireland, is seamless. We share intelligence, we share information on a daily basis. What we hope is that whatever the outcome is, that we will be able, whatever it's called, we will be able to do the same thing. But there's no doubt that a disorganised withdrawal will pose a challenge to that, because George Hamilton and Drew Harris are good, close colleagues over many years. They share similar philosophies around policing. They want to do their best by the communities that they serve, and they will extend that relationship as far as it's humanly and audaciously possible. But neither of them will either break the law or encourage their staff to break the law. So you need those legal underpinnings to share that intelligence and share that information. You need those legal underpinnings to pursue people in the other jurisdiction to try and extradite them back. Now, there's lots of work going on to try and understand those implications and to try and plug those holes. And that work is going on, it's advancing. But it is affected by the uncertainty. It is affected by politics, undoubtedly. There's a political process, and my first couple of lines I talked about EU is a political process. We're not politicians, we're apolitical. We're trying to deal with the criminal justice consequences. And I want to reassure you that our ambition, our desire will be to still do what we can do today. But we need that legal underpinning, and that's where the political process and the legislators kick in. But I know that ourselves and our colleagues in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, for example, are working very, very hard at trying to prepare us so that any loss is as minimalist as possible.
Yeah, I mean, to just reinforce that, I think when you look at the national leaders around policing and security, so Lynn Owens, as the Director General of the National Crime Agency, has made it very clear that a disorganised exit from Europe would lead to the loss of powers and would have a significant impact on the UK's ability to work with partners to counter organised crime. And whilst we're working hard to mitigate that, we will not recover that, and that will be difficult. Sarah Thornton, as the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, has summarily said the same things, and our Chief Constable has supported those comments. I think it's also important to understand that as much as law enforcement and policing are preparing to understand what the implications are for us of EU exit, so are criminal groups and other groups, and they will seek to exploit and manipulate the situation to their benefit. So anything that undermines our ability to counter that quickly and promptly and effectively is a negative thing, and I think we have been consistently clear that a no-deal exit from Europe has significantly negative implications for safety and security in Northern Ireland, in Southern Ireland, and in the United Kingdom, and actually across Europe. And our commitment is we will work as hard as possible to mitigate those risks, but it's our responsibility to make clear the potential implications from a safety and security perspective.
Dolores?
Thank you.
Dolores Kelly, Policing Board member. Tim, you said in your presentation that you were keen to ensure, the police were keen to ensure that
there would be no perception of a safe haven for criminals either north or south of this island. But in the event of a no-deal scenario and the European arrest warrant, and you said as well that there'd be 5 to be issued hopefully this week, what would be the status of those European arrest warrants? Should they be deployed this week? Would they be upheld in follow-up extradition or court proceedings? And the other aspect, what reassurance have you got from the Home Office in terms of how quickly legislation would be put through Westminster to replace European arrest warrant? What time frame have you been given?
So to work through some of those issues, those 5 European arrest warrants are actually executed. These are people who were returned this week, so those will be completed. It's also worth stressing that when we talked about our bilateral arrangements, there will remain things such as the Criminal Jurisdiction Acts, both in Ireland and Northern Ireland from the 1970s, which allowed the transfer of prosecutions from north to south and vice versa. And you'll be aware that even up to the point of a very high-profile murder trial of a murder that occurred in Belfast, and the suspect was tried in the criminal court in Dublin, and that court actually sat in Belfast to take evidence for a week. So those powers will remain. We will be able to still do that, but they're suboptimal to what we're looking at. In basic terms, at the point at 11 o'clock on the date when the UK is due to leave the European Union in a no-deal scenario, those European arrest warrants will cease to be enforced. And as a result, PS and I are working with the Department of Justice and the Home Office around what the mitigation for that looks like. The Irish government have already laid and passed legislation that allows Ireland to recognise the 1957 Convention, so that's in place. And my understanding from the Home Office is legislatively we're in a position to be able to do that as well. So arrangements are in place, risks are understood around each individual circumstance, and we're working very, very hard to mitigate those risks, Dolores. And we'll continue to do that. And again, it's just worth acknowledging the support we've had from the Department of Justice and the Home Office in doing that. But it is suboptimal, and it will be returning to a convention that is slower and is less efficient and less effective.
Anyone else? Goodness, silence them. Linda? Doesn't often happen in a police and board seminar, or we get outside.
Linda Dillon, Police and Board Member, Sinn Féin. Just in terms of the cost of all of this preparatory work for what may or may not happen, I know this was asked of the Chief Constable, and he did say that there was obviously a cost because you have the cost of officers' times, and particularly at a senior level. But is there any assessment of what that cost actually is? Because even now when you talk about the European arrest warrants, and if we lose them in a slower process, there's a cost going to be incurred there again, which is a financial cost as well to the PSNI, which has the knock-on effect of affecting what we see as important, and that is the policing with the community piece, on which you might get these additional officers, which hopefully will be put into neighbourhood teams. That's for 1 year, you said that yourselves, and the big risk is we put that in for 1 year and then remove it. Then you're leaving those areas that have got used to it, that have built those relationships, and there's a cost in that as well, and it's not just financial, as you would well know.
Thanks, Linda. So the financial cost to begin with. So we've talked about the 16.48 million, which you've alluded to. So that will buy officers and staff and some capital money for a bit of estate work and purchase of vehicles. This current financial year that's coming to an end in the next few days, we were given £800,000 in year to assist us with preparation. So the sort of work that we've outlined we've been doing with partner agencies, tabletop exercising, we've been carrying out a range of operational exercising, all our contingency planning, our engagement with London. We have had some money that will assist in covering our costs. To reassure you, as a board member, Mark is here, Mark McNaughton, our Director of Finance. We are putting in place measures to try as best as we possibly can to capture the costs that we are incurring as a police service to do with EU exit. The issue that you used the European arrest warrant again and the extradition as an example. I suppose when we see what the withdrawal settlement looks like and we start to see the implications, the potential implications that we're speculating on here today, the very educated speculation depending on the scenario, but we're still speculating because we don't know what the political settlement will be. But when we see what those operational impacts are, so for example a reliance on the 57 Convention as opposed to European arrest warrants, that makes a more complicated process and we need to put more staff hours into, it's more bureaucratic, more court appearances. We will do our best to try and understand the financial implication that those changes have for us as an organisation. You then talk about opportunity costs effectively, and you use a good example that we're going to invest in local policing as a part of this 308 officers and staff that we are recruiting. Inevitably that will see the creation of neighbourhood style teams operating in the round border areas, parts of Belfast, building relationships, working with local people, addressing local issues. And with that builds a relationship, builds people become familiar, they become accessible, they become known, and people build trust. And we recognise that, and we recognise then that if, back to Yvonne's question at the start, if that funding is not sustainable and we have to reduce the size, how do we manage that? It's something we're very attuned to. We haven't come to any firm decisions around that, about what that post-era would look like. But what I can reassure you is that we go into it with our eyes open. We know that when we deploy resource and when relationships are built, when links with communities are established, that to then withdraw that will come at a cost unless we manage that process very carefully, or we take a more ambitious approach around it. Others, I was at the Resources Committee earlier, and there were members expressing approval for trying to retain that funding for an investment in neighbourhood policing and policing the community. So we won't be shy around trying to demonstrate the purpose and value of that resource and trying to hold on to it if we did and arrive in a situation where we were hearing that it wasn't sustainable. But we will work. We will listen to the representations of the board. The community speak through the board. We will listen to that. We will engage with those communities at a local level, and we will seek to understand, and we will, if we have to reduce, and we've taken 200 police officers out of the system, out of the service in the last 2 years, purely on affordability grounds, not because we wanted to do it, and we've tried to do that thoughtfully and in a way that has minimal impact on communities on our frontline service delivery, and we'll seek to do that. But it is, you put your finger on something that we've recognised is a conundrum, but at least we're aware of it, and we work very carefully to ensure that any effect is as least impactful and problematic as possible.
And I think it's worth picking up on your point, and those officers are going into neighbourhood teams to deliver policing to the community. I think it's important to be absolutely clear that that's the duty of those officers. These additional officers being deployed into these communities are going there because we identify that these are communities vulnerable to crime and who will have a higher level of uncertainty. These are not officers to enforce a border, and they will not be involved in border activity, and we need to be absolutely clear about that. These are community police officers who will be working with vulnerable and concerned communities to support and sustain that community empowerment through this uncertain time.
Okay.
From the Green Party, just following on from that, when you were mentioning that all those 300 officers won't be all deployed to rural areas, which will be focusing on Belfast in particular. Have you got a ratio, or are you looking at numbers? And I'm not sure, Tim, if I picked you up earlier and you were saying that after the referendum results that Northern Ireland didn't see the same spike as GB in terms of any sort of ramping up of racial tensions and hate crime.
Yeah.
Is that still the same today?
So, I'll answer the proportions piece first. I don't have the exact numbers to hand, Claire, but it's in the region of around, if you take this as a health warning, in around 40 we're proposing to place in Belfast. And 40 officers. A much larger number will go towards those 5 districts that have a border dimension to them, and then the rest of the distribution as per Tim's
some into courts, some into the college, some into the central team, some into organised crime. But about 40 officers in Belfast, because we do recognise that depending on what the withdrawal looks like, we could, there's confidence issues that could affect community stability, for example, in parts of Belfast. Plus, we could see protest activity much more likely in and around Belfast, as we've seen on many occasions in the past. So we recognise that there's merit in an investment there.
And specifically on the hate crime issue, and I think we have to acknowledge that the major health warning around all statements around this, because we know that hate crime is significantly underreported. So what we're referring to are numbers of crimes and incidents that are reported to the police service. We're not seeing an increase, a significant increase this year, specifically within race hate crime when we look across all the factors. We continue to engage and listen, and it may be that the communities are feeling a change in trends. That's not what we're seeing and hearing yet, but it is something that we're working very hard to keep in touch with. Yes, we didn't see the spike the same way that the rest of the UK did after the referendum. We're not seeing that trend emerging here, but we're not complacent about it.
There's somebody just waiting behind. I can't see where the microphone went. Yes, sir.
John Earhart, I'm just a Joe citizen, applying for the leasing board in the future, I hope. The question I had was an issue that comes up in the United States a lot, and that's what you're talking about, cross-border. We have cross-county or cross-state, and we have in place in most states what's called hot pursuit laws. And if you are in a Code 3, you would continue on, and either state would accept the other going into their state for Code 3 pursuit. Is that, we have that here in Northern Ireland and South?
Thanks for the question. The answer is no, we don't. The way the position is constitutionally at the moment is Northern Ireland and Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, are two different sovereign territories. So they're entirely constitutionally different countries, and therefore the legal framework that prevails at the moment would not permit the situation you describe, such as hot pursuit. We do engage operationally and at all levels, locally right up to the very top level on a daily basis, sergeant to sergeant, across the border, inspector to inspector, on all wide range of issues. So the cooperation and the partnership is there. We also cooperate on a more statutory basis around the sharing of information, for example, sex offenders, even sharing equipment. But the precise example that you give, the current legal position doesn't cater for that.
There were provisions within what's known as the Schengen agreed within Europe, which allows for hot pursuit. Ireland and the UK, though, are able to opt out of that, and those provisions are not in place. So if you were to go to Belgium or the Netherlands, they have hot pursuit in place, and that allows police officers to travel within a certain distance of each side of the border and exercise powers. But we've never bought into that framework, either Ireland or the UK.
Daniel wanted to ask another question.
I just wanted to come back to the receipt thing when it was raised again, because we did do research into this, as Brett said, Laura and I, and I mean, and you're totally right about the issue around non-reporting and the issues around the reliability of figures. One of the things that came out of that was there seemed to be a perception of a drop-off of reporting, even after because of the political climate that was created by the referendum of general anti-migrant hostility. It then loses people's confidence in the state as a whole, and that was one of the issues that was regularly reported. If I remember rightly, there was an 80% increase in racist and sectarian hate incidents in the month after the referendum to the months before, the average numbers in the months before it. Now, that was because the referendum took place in June, and there's an 80% increase in July every year on racist and sexist. So it was quite, I think this issue of was there a spike, wasn't there a spike, I don't think it's that simple, because the suggestion that there wasn't a spike, I mean clearly there was an 80% increase, but you can't attribute all of that to Brexit. That it wasn't quite as big as an increase that year as it had been on maybe the previous years. But I think, and I'm not trying to create alarm, but I think we need to make sure we're not complacent about this either. But certainly there are a number, quite significant number of racist attacks, I mean, anecdotally, and that were directly related to Brexit. It's the "we voted, get out" type stuff, graffiti and various other things that were very directly linked. But certainly our experience through that sort of research is that it has increased very significantly. And it's also manifesting itself not necessarily in crimes and incidents, but in discrimination and access to services even more. That was the type of experience people were reporting quite generally. So just to throw that in the sense that the spike may not have been as clear here because of the particular context of what happens in July every year, but certainly there is a body of evidence, and in fact the numbers did increase when you look at it not just the first couple of months, but when you look at it over the course of the whole year after the referendum. And I just think we don't know what we're now facing into in terms of political discourse about Brexit models, and whether the question of freedom of movement within the EU in particular Brexit models will come back into focus in the coming months. And I think it's something we need to be very extra vigilant of.
Yeah, and I think that exactly reinforces why we are keen to increase our neighbourhood and community policing footprint in vulnerable communities, so that we can at an early stage pick up concerns, build relationships of trust with a wide range of communities, and ensure that we work with partners to deal with tensions as early as possible and manage those. I think you're right, it's very hard to attribute what the fluctuations and trends are due to, but from our perspective there's only limited value in trying to figure out why these incidents are increasing. We're more concerned about ensuring that they don't increase, and in fact we don't want them happening at all. The majority of people in Northern Ireland want this to be a safe and welcoming and open society, and that's what we see every day, and as a police service that's what we're committed to working with partners to deliver.
Yeah, and I just would want to echo and reinforce that point. You know, hate crime is completely unacceptable. Absolutely, there's no apathy or complacency. It's a very, very important issue for the police service. It's a very important issue for the police board. We have specific hate crime leads. We have hate crime leaders and officers in all districts. We work extensively with organisations such as Patrick's, and you know, right across all the 9 dimensions of discrimination. But we're talking about race hate, particularly at the moment. And so please, I would want to absolutely reassure Patrick and yourself, Daniel, and everyone that this will remain an important issue. It's at the heart of what we're planning and trying to prepare for in terms of Brexit. And we will do everything we can to investigate hate crime, prevent it occurring, support minority communities and those who are vulnerable. I will also say that this is another area where we were before the executive regrettably fell. This is an area, there's no specific hate crime legislation in Northern Ireland. This is an area that we were already engaging local government about, but regrettably that's an area that we can't pursue in the absence of an executive. We do have aggravation, where if an offence is committed we can use aggravated sentences, but we don't have actually specific hate crime legislation, which you'll know. But Patrick and others would just like to reassure that any concerns at all, we will seek to address them swiftly and thoroughly.
Yeah, I think we, thank you for the PSN over almost 10 years period to support the hate crime issue. But I think the Brexit also linked directly across the whole Europe about Islamophobia, which is not under the race category, it is under the religion belief. So I think you are aware, when we talk to your side, the policing board and also DOJ about the whole Islamophobia and the right wing in particular. I'm pleased to hear now the prosecution quick, and hope they could not come back to us. But I think the underlying issue linked with the far right, it is also the involvement with those former paramilitary people will reinforce all those things. And I think that's exactly what we concern. I think we have been also looking at whether we should increase the power of the International Commission of Reporting, just like the OICN, not only just monitor the criminality, but also looking at also both the terrorism and racism attack within Northern Ireland. I think it is a not easy one, but I think if the community and police could work together, we could get all those things done. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, we're going to leave it there. On behalf of all the people here in Policing Board, I want to thank you, Stephen and Tim, not just for the work that you have done today, but for all of the work which unseen and which you're doing on our behalf. And sometimes we forget how much goes on behind the scenes, whether it's needed or not. It's part of what you have to do. So I want to thank all of you for coming along and participating, and thanks to the two of you. And I think they deserve a round of applause. And we will let you know when the next meeting. We do intend to continue with seminars, even though we've now got board meetings, but when that will be, we will let you know. We haven't got a date yet, people. Okay, thank you.
All right.